Good afternoon. This is Media Center Ukraine, Odesa, and we are starting for today. You can watch us online, both on our YouTube channel or on our Facebook page. And you can also ask your questions online. Just scan the QR code that you can now see on the screen. Our current topic is Israel. This is the 41st day of the war Hamas-Israel, between Hamas-Israel. Our speaker is Oleksiy Demchenko, journalist and founder of the social project YakiLyudi. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. Good afternoon, Yevhen. Let's start with the terrorist attack in Jerusalem. As far as it is known, there were terrorists that just started shooting at people. What information do you have? That's all I know. No information is disclosed. There is just a short message of that terrorist attack, and the forces have been searching for these terrorists. You're now in Haifa, if I'm not mistaken. Is the city shelled? Luckily, not at the moment. And we are rather far from the sector Gaza, and when it comes to the attacks from Lebanon, there was only one attempt, and luckily everything was intercepted. That was the only day that we had the air raid alert. The Hamas-Israel war started 41 days ago, and first the shelling was rather heavy. What about the frequency now? The frequency now is not that intensive, because at the beginning we had like 5-10 air raid alerts in some cities. Now they can have 1 or 2 per day. What is the response of Israeli citizens to the air raid alert? It depends. There are clear algorithms, what should be done, where to go. And on the other hand, we can now see that people are getting used to that. So it depends on the psychological type of a person, how they respond. Some people go to shelters right away. Other people just continue their everyday life and activities. But I think the same can be said about other countries. If we try to find similarities between Israel and Ukraine, in Ukraine first we had some problems with the shelters, and I know that in Israel the situation was the same. What is how the situation now? It again depends. If it's southern regions, which is that is under constant attacks, and they are the part of the development strategy. That means that almost every house has a shelter. There are civilian shelters almost in all streets. When it comes to the north and Haifa, the situation is much worse here. We can have only one civil shelter for 2-3 weeks, and it takes 2-3 minutes to get there, to run there. And on the one hand, this is good that nothing serious happens here. But on the other hand, if something happens there, Haifa will find itself in a much worse situation compared to the south. 2 shops, malls closed in Israel during the air raid alert. Officially, they must do so, and during the first days, there were no questions about that. But now, for example, in Tel Aviv, there is an individual approach. As for volunteer activities, and again, if we try to find similarities with Ukraine, at the beginning of the full-scale invasion, all Ukrainians united to support the armed forces of Ukraine. And I know that in Israel, people have united to support your armed forces, Could you share more details about this? Yes, the process is really similar to Ukraine. And since the first day, we've had a very powerful volunteer movement supporting the army, IDPs, their social projects like mental support of people. And it all started since the first day of the war. And now the supply of the army is more or less stabilized. There are 360,000 soldiers, and now it's easier to procure everything. And now volunteers are more involved in supporting relatives of soldiers, on mental support, work with children when it comes to traumas. The question is about the Sahel army. Does the army has everything it needs? Do you have any money-raising campaigns to support your army, and is there any support from international partners? This is a rather disputable issue. On the one hand, we know that Sahel is one of the best financed army of the world. I don't remember the exact numbers, but this share is the biggest, one of the biggest in the world. But during the first days, when 360,000 soldiers were mobilized, it turned out that it is rather difficult to procure everything they need during the first days. And that's why they faced some problems with basic food products, armored vests, weapons. But as for purchase of weapons for the army, it is quite strange in Israel. So there are some exclusions. So we can now see problems with toothpaste, underwear, some sweets to improve the morale and mood of soldiers, medication. As for military ammunition, so we don't see so many cases, and it is not perceived as normal in Israel. So there is understanding that civilians should not procure military ammunition to the army. That this is the task of the state. What is the salary of Israeli soldiers? The situations are different, and as far as I understand, it depends on their rank and experience. And it starts from $1,500. This is their minimum salary. In Ukraine, at the beginning of the full-scale invasion, we saw huge queues near the military commissariats. What can you tell about mobilization process in Israel? As there was also the mobilization campaign, but a lot of people, they just did not wait for their summons, and people just got to their units. And we know that in Israel there is reserve training. This is, I don't know the details, but we know that those who had experience, they undergo regular training. And those people, they did not wait for a summons, and they just were heading to their units, and we could see traffic jams in roads. This is for those who underwent conscript service before. In Ukraine, just to be able to cover those activities in combat zone, we need to receive permission from the Ministry of Defense. Can you repeat your question, because I cannot hear you well? How is mass media activities are organized in Israel? Do you need some special permissions to cover what is happening there? I can tell you about the volunteer activities. there is some bureaucracy. Volunteers should receive permissions. Sorry, Oleksiy, I'm asking about a different thing. The question about journalists. What documents or permissions are needed to be able to cover what is happening in Israel? There is the international accreditation procedure. When it comes to cooperation with the military, direct contacts, this should be made through the press service of the Israeli army, and everyone should be licensed. In Ukraine, at the beginning of the full-scale invasion, the different TV channels united to have a single news marathon. Have you seen anything like this in Israel? How Israeli mass media cover this war? Unfortunately, I have a bad connection. In Ukraine, there is a single information marathon. Have you seen anything like this in Israel? No, there is no single information resource. We saw no unified efforts of media. They work as usual to more or less extent. And of course, the biggest share of time is used to cover the war in Israel. Let's come back to volunteer activities. Do you receive any support from Ukraine? I cannot answer the question because I'm not aware of this. Those volunteer organizations who cooperated with Ukraine continue this cooperation, and they are involved in many volunteer projects to support the Israeli army. These are those people who reside here, including refugees. The question is about shops, how the war has affected the prices. Have you seen any geotags in shops? Yes, we have seen the increase of prices by 1%, but media say that it's around 5%. And I believe that the second number is more realistic because there are product categories that have become more expensive. There is no deficit. And I cannot say about the south of Ukraine, but in the north, I can see all items in shops. What is the attitude of Israeli citizens to the war? Aren't they tired? But also, this is only the 41st day, and in Ukraine, the war started longer ago. But what people discuss in the streets, at markets, because we can see the information provided by the media outlets, but you are there on the spot. What can you see in the country? When it comes to those people who have been involved in volunteer activities from the first day of the war, those people who have their relatives at the front line, I can see that these people are tired, including like physically and emotionally. But when it comes to those people who are not directly involved, the situation is different. People feel elevated because there is not so many air raid alerts, and the combat activities are not that intensive. And we can see that the restoration of life in different cities. And for me personally, one of the signs is when on the third, fourth week of the war, got in a traffic jam. And because during the first day, there were a few cars in the street. There were traffic jams only on the way to military units. But now we can see that traffic jams in the cities. So this means that people are recovering. But on the other hand, there is a big group of people who are directly involved or related to the combat activity, and the situation is different. And this is post-trauma that we will have to deal with in the future. Have you seen the mass fleeing of people from the country? No. Of course, that some people left the country, but we did not see even like hundreds, thousands, or thousands of people. On the contrary, a lot of people returned from abroad, especially conscripts. They were ready to pay huge money for tickets to be able to return to their country. Is the informational environment of the country fully covers the situation in Israel, or do they still focus on the war in Ukraine? There is some information, but comparing to what we had before the war, this is not the priority of mass media. We can see some sporadic informational messages, but of course our main focus is the war in Israel. Recently, the Prime Minister of Israel, Netanyahu, has mentioned that if they can stop Hamas in Israel, Hamas will move off to Europe. Have you heard anything about that? Yes, we've been hearing this since the first days of the war. On the second day, if I'm not mistaken, when the war was declared till the very end, till the victory, yes, this has not been unchanged. Hasn't been changed. Can you see some criticism of the Israeli authorities and government on the web? Yes, of course, but this is like the normal thing. And this is one of the signs of recovery of people, because during first day, people were shocked. But now, there are some attempts to analyze of what happened during the first day of the war, who should be blamed for that. And there are a lot of questions. Thank you, Oleksiy, for joining us today, the Media Center Ukraine, Odesa. Thank you for providing more details about the situation in Israel. And, we can find a lot of similarities with what we had during the first day of the full-scale invasion and now, and what you have in your country. Thank you very much for joining us today. And I would like to wish victory to both countries. Yes, we're sure in this for Ukraine and Israel, and we'll continue in 12:30. At 12:30.